I have no idea if we're live yet or not.
We are theoretically live, I
Oh,
think. We'll see. So
see
the
someone
trick
in the
is that
chat.
somebody in the chat has to say that we're live, and then we know that we're actually live.
Hey guys, how's it going? Today I'm going to show you my awesome new Expanse. I think we're live because I just had an emotional
Oh
problem.
yeah, I should have told you to make sure you turn off your the live stream so that you don't get a chance to see it. Well,
Funny.
hey everybody, welcome to a Larry. I'm gonna. Oh, stop. All right, there we go. And moderate. Perfect. I just deputize you, Larry. All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to a very special live chat QA hangout with my buddy Isaac Arthur, who you may know. Isaac, how's it going?
It's doing pretty well, Fraser. Glad to be on finally.
Yeah, well, it's funny. We've talked on the phone, we've talked on like Hangouts, but we've never actually like just kind of hung out and yacked with people, and we've never kind of bolted in any kind of live stream so that people can hang out with us and ask us questions. So this is totally an experiment, and thanks to everybody who joined us today. Now for anyone who has no, I don't even know why I should do this, right? Like, should I introduce myself and not you? But because I know that you've got a ton of fans, and man, it is people are pretty excited to kind of have this. Hopefully, it's going to have a really fun back and forth. So, if you have never seen who I am, I'm Fraser Cain. I'm the publisher of Universe Today, which is a space and astronomy news website that I've been running for almost 20 years now. And I've been doing the YouTube thing for the last, say, 5 years, co host of the Astronomy Cast podcast. So lots and lots of space and astronomy news. Isaac, who are you?
I'm Isaac Arthur. I'm the host of Science and Futurism with Isaac Arthur and a longtime reader of Universe Today, actually.
Oh,
Someone was asking me the other day, where do you go for news? And I said, well, Centauri Dreams and Universe Today. So have been the ones I've been using forever. And well, let's see. I guess the SFIA channel has been going for almost 4 years now. We are in
yeah.
season. Hard to believe it's been that
Yeah, and
long.
you're absolutely crushing it, man. You're killing me. You're rocking. I've when I
When I get to 20, I'll let you know.
yeah. So just make sure you remember us when you cross that million mark.
I think that'd be a while still.
Yeah,
We are
and
about
and
250 though, so.
and so like and your educational background is in physics.
Yeah, I went to Kent State for physics, both grad school and undergrad, and about halfway through the doctoral program, I skipped town and ran off to the army for about a decade, and came back home here to Asheville, Ohio. So
um, did you? I'm just gonna make sure. Just be one thing. You know, you're fairly new. Just be careful with your mic control. If you move back and forth too much, then people can't. You know, then you move far away from the mic, and the volume changes. But yeah. And so, what were you going to study?
well, the area I was in was theoretical biophysics of all things, a subcategory of condensed matter. At the time we were doing it was right after the genome project had just wrapped up, and my advisor, Mike Lee from Kent, he had said, and he was a theoretician, he had said he'd had a lot of time working on quantum chemistry. He wanted to see if he could do the same for for microbiology as we'd done there. And I don't think the computers were up to it even today, but they were not at the time. But we mostly studied adenosine triphosphate, trying to model those molecular motors and on the ATPAs. And I have to admit, I actually hated it. So,
Yeah.
I'd originally been planning to go into nuclear astro, but I have to admit, I'm kind of glad I didn't because there's so many other areas of physics besides just those. And they're fascinating. I think they're everybody's
Yeah.
first love, but there's so much more to look at. But I probably picked the wrong one.
Yeah, well, like I had originally gone to engineering,
Mm-hmm.
and same kind of thing, which is like I admire engineers from afar, and I love the idea of engineering, but to actually sit there and calculate load strengths and dynamic, static pressures on various things, and I could sort of see this future of myself as a someone who's going to work on like air conditioning, HVACs for buildings. I'm like, okay, maybe I'm going to go into computers instead, which ended up being a lot more rewarding. So, my background is in computer science. And yet both of us ended up in this kind of astronomy, future, space exploration, explaining game, which is quite funny.
I've decided to go with calling it science communicating. It seems to make more sense.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I think science
I'm never sure what to
communicating
call
is a
it. They all
much
spread around so
tighter
much.
way than what I just described. Yeah, exactly.
But it's about the only thing I can think to call it is because, I mean, it's obviously a pretty niche area, but it's because you try to spread out over so many different things, and you're not doing active research, you're pretty much teaching. And that's more fun than teaching for a lecture hall, I think. So,
Yeah, it's a tough business to get into. I mean, a lot of people are competing for not a lot of jobs. So, I kind of like the fact that I'm able to do this separate career from having to like try to go and get my PhD and go and actually work at some research institution and then publish papers and stuff. So yeah, no, absolutely. It just shows you, right? Like if you are interested in this stuff and you want to get involved, you don't necessarily have to go and get a career and go all the way through. You can leave halfway through your PhD and go join the army for a while.
I was thinking some of the people I know, and even in many other fields too, some of the people I know who are most expert on things have nothing beyond a high school diploma. They just have that passion for the topic.
Yeah,
The formal education certainly helps, though, to that you get that corrective influence of making sure you're not going off on false trails and
yeah.
get the core stuff in there fast and clear, so you're not getting confused. Uh,
So I think that's the background. People know who we are. I think the fun part is that we're just going to get into it. We're going to talk about the topics that you want us to talk about: SpaceX, the future, the state of technology, the whatever existential cosmic dread you want to get into, the which is going to kill us first, the AIs or the bio weapons. Just start hitting us with the kinds of topics that you want to talk about, and we would love to do it. And one that sort of came up early on, I know from someone, was it Andrew? Was talking about the BFR timeline. What do you think about where we at along the timeline with SpaceX, just starting, from
that's so
the
tricky.
Falcon Heavy launch to the Dyson Sphere? Where are we along that timeline?
Oh, I think, I will reevaluate that in about 5 or 6 years after the rocket's actually seen some surface time. Um, I mean, it's amazing to finally, because we've all grown up kind of waiting for the next thing after Apollo, and it always seems like it's just 10 more years, just 10 more years. Now it actually feels like it really is just 10 more years. As to four-scale stuff like Dyson spheres, that's still centuries away,
What?
but it is centuries, I think, not millions of
Yeah,
years
yeah,
or anything.
yeah. No, I mean I was being a little, overly dramatic.
Yeah.
Where we stand right now, right, is that Elon Musk has said that the BFR, the BFS, the spaceship portion, is going to start doing hop tests next year, and that it's going to go orbital by 2020, and that they're still hoping to do the first launches to Mars by 2022. So,
Elon Musk is a tricky figure in that, he makes a lot of very strong predictions. I think of
yeah,
him as a bit of an Edison or Tesla figure. But the thing is, well, he tends to be right a lot of times too. I'm not willing to say that come 2022, there won't be some launch. But at the same time, I think that's probably being on the optimistic side. And he freely admits that he's on the optimistic side.
yeah,
He should, you know. But I think 2030 is actually looking much more realistic right now, and I'm patient. I've waited through every administration down here in the U.S. has proclaimed when we're going back to the moon or when we're going to Mars,
yeah.
and it's never quite happened. And but I'm thinking maybe now it will, and that would be very awesome to get to live to see.
Yeah. Um, so here's a question that came from Martin Common, which is: Isaac, how much time do you spend on writing and producing your weekly videos and podcasts?
Oh, these, it used to be a hobby, and I still tend to think of it as a hobby. But I mean, I guess these days it's pretty much my normal work day. Um, Loosely speaking, very loosely speaking, probably about 1 hour of production time from script to production per minute of video. So a 30-minute video is taking probably 30 hours of work, sometimes more, sometimes less. I work at home on these things, so it's stop and play a video game for 5 minutes to clear my head type things. It's
Yeah.
makes keeping track of time kind of tricky. It keeps me very busy, but you can do shorter and simpler a lot faster. It's all about what your style is.
Yeah. Yeah. So like just the writing, just the script part. what is your kind of, how long does that part take? Because I've actually, we actually wrote together, worked on a couple
Mhm.
of scripts, and it's funny to sort of see the way we both attack it and the way it sort of, you write very quickly. I was quite impressed to write with you and to see how quickly your material came together.
I tend to write thought streams, so sometimes I would just sit down. Actually, normally I just sit down with the topic and maybe a couple of notes on points I want to remember, and then just start typing till I'm done. Sometimes that's 3 or 4 hours, sometimes that's 4 or 5 hours, and sometimes we're on draft 10 or 11. Each one just keeps getting dumped. And typically speaking, almost anytime I'm not happy with a script and I don't feel it could be just edited a little bit, I just toss it out and start from fresh. So I've had episodes that have taken weeks to write and others that have
Yeah.
been bam that afternoon, and
So
it,
what's the topic that you've got that you started is sitting there on your drive and you just can't seem to finish it, but you really wish you could finish it, but it's just
jobs of the future.
jobs of the future?
Jobs of the future. We have a
Yeah.
script sitting on our Google Drive.
Yeah.
And I mean, I wrote it, but I wasn't happy with it. And I keep meaning to revisit that because we get asked about that. That was actually a poll. I mean, we often ask people to do a poll and see what they want to see. And I think that came in at number two on one of them. And I've written it 3 or 4 times, and I've not even touched it in at least a month.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
really hard one. It's a really hard topic
Uh,
to do.
so mine is militarization of space. So after Trump did his we need a space force
Hmm.
speech, I'm like, well, what is a space force? Like, what would that actually be? And I have been
Robots fighting out there.
grinding away on that video, for probably 2 months
Oh,
now, because
that's such a hard topic.
it's such a hard topic because there's sort of like already so much militarization of space already, but then you're trying to use your imagination to figure out sort of what would come next. Yeah, it's rough, but it's
I've
funny.
actually I've done space warfare topics, but I always put them pretty far ahead in time,
Yeah,
and
well, so like I wasn't talking about. I actually was going to link to what you had done, and Kyle Hill did a great video about space warfare, and Joe Hansen from It's Okay to Be Smart, and so I had linked to those for like the physics of space warfare, but I want to talk about just like what sort of like how do we go from what we have today to what comes next, right? If the U.S. has been tasked with having a space force, which it has, right?
well, I can't remember what it's called, strategic space command.
Yeah, space. They had to develop a space corps was the
Hmm.
requirement sometime this year out of the Air Force, and like what would that look like? What would these people do? So anyway, this is tough, and
I
it's a
would
it's
not
a
want to
tough
try to
one.
write a your future topic on that one. That would be a bit
Yeah,
much.
yeah. So that's what works for me. Um, David Chipman wants to know what's your day job.
Oh, well, actually, these days I think it's the channel. I am. I sit on the board of elections of Ashby County here in Ohio. We take our elections very seriously too. So I actually have a staff too, and they don't see me too often. It's a little bit more like being on a school board where there's a director and
Yeah.
that actually handles most of the day-to-day things. And obviously, again in Ohio, especially in even years, we have a primary coming up in about 2 weeks here. And if you're in the United States, don't forget those. Get yourself registered to vote now and go vote. Although,
Yeah, you know what? Let's just take the rest of this episode and we'll just talk about voting and elections and how that all works. Um, but all right,
but yeah, I mean that's basically it's something you have to go to a lot of conferences for. And again, Ohio, and I'm not even being not exaggerating too much here. I like to think Ohio has probably the best electoral system in terms of how it's operated as opposed to structurally,
yeah.
in probably the entire world. Just because when you're a purple state in the United States, everybody is watching you constantly, and there are so many rules you have to follow that can seem to a lot of people kind of pointless or over the top, but at some point there was a lawsuit because people want to make sure it was very clean. So it's totally transparent, totally making sure people are confident that everything is fair, and it's harder than it sounds like. But
Roman Gabriel wants to know: are you going to have any plans to add live shows to your channel, like this, like what we're doing right
actually,
now?
this is kind of a trial for that.
Yeah.
I mean, I've done a couple other live interviews. Well, the one with Joe wasn't actually live, but it is kind of I've meant to do sort of a monthly Q&A and wrap up. it's been something that's been on the plan, on the drawing board for a while and been requested, but I'm still not too sure how to do it, and I haven't wanted to try just yet. So
Well, anytime you need a hand, just let me know. I've got so much experience in running live shows now. I'm sure we can get you up and running as no problem.
be careful what you volunteer for. I would definitely take you up on
Done, done. Let's make it happen. Next week, you host the party.
that. Can't do next week, but I
All
think
right,
soon
all
after
right.
that.
Um,
Um,
so upcycle electronics is what's the world going to be like after Elon Musk? Is he a figurative Julius Caesar or Charlemagne? What do you think about sort of, you know, Musk's place in the annals of history? Where will he come down?
Edison. That's the closest analogy I can think
Yeah,
of. An Edison Tesla kind of figure. Because again, he's not a Newton or Einstein or Hawking type figure, and he's not. I wouldn't say he's a Caesar or Charlemagne either. He's very science knowledgeable. He's very passionate about what he does. He's strangely controversial. People seem to either really love him or really dislike him. I don't know why. To me, he just seems like a very upstanding guy that I wish well on his projects, but they're not always perfect. I wish we had more people like him.
yeah.
And hopefully that, I mean, if I had to say one thing I'd hope he would become is a role model for other people to do what he's doing.
Yeah,
To
I
be
mean, I
honest.
think that what he has a real technique for doing is this idea of coming back and thinking about things from first principles, right? So he says to himself, what could the laws of physics permit a rocket to do? What should the laws of physics allow a drill? How quickly should a drill be able to go through underground? What is the theoretical charge capacity of a battery? And then says, why aren't the things that we have not kind of permitting that, right? And
And
then
that's very important.
re-engineering until you get as close to the laws of physics as you should be able to do. And I think that's the real thing that he's brought to the table that I'm hoping a lot of other people are going to take, from his inspiration, right? Is that?
He's very good at locating what the key question is, that
Yeah.
what's the thing that's holding us back on this, and then saying we need to deal with this. And often isn't him obviously solving it in most cases, but people are saying, wow, we need to, maybe we can redo this idea. And even if it doesn't work out in some of these, it's good to try. I'm saying, I can't remember if it's 9 out of 10 failures or 99.
Yeah.
But one is worth it.
Yeah.
One is always worth it. And if we have more people doing this, more people thinking this way, and upbeat too, because honestly, the world in this decade has been very depressed, as a cultural. So it's nice to see people starting to find things to feel passionate about. And we can use more stuff like that.
And I think that's exactly. I think you hit the nail right on the head, right? Which is that idea of feeling passionate about the changes, being excited about the kinds of things that are happening. He has so much motivation and goodwill from a lot of people out there to just say, "Hey, we're excited about the possibilities that are coming and the things that have already happened," and they're willing to sort of accept the fact that, say, the Falcon Heavy arrives 6-7 years later than originally anticipated. So, yeah,
With him, at least, it's, we said 3 years, it's going to turn out to be five. Now, we said three, we're now saying 20 more years from now with it delayed, And that happens so much in the aerospace industry, that especially with the way the public's concerned. Nobody's twirling their thumbs in these fields. No one has
yeah,
been for the last 34 years. But when all you're hearing is the excerpts of it going on in the news, it's hard to, and same thing with something like fusion, it's hard to keep up your enthusiasm.
yeah.
People are chipping away at the wall. They sometimes find the wall is a bit thicker or harder than planned, but it's not like somebody just stopped and took a lunch break. It's going. We're making progress.
Yeah.
But it's nice sometimes to actually see that progress.
Yeah, and see a rocket land. All right, so here's a
Love that shot every time I see that.
Raiden Sharaj wants to know your favorite space-based website and magazine.
Universe Today.
Well, of course, Universe
No,
Today,
it
but
really is actually a tie between you and Paul Gilst over at Centauri Dreams.
I love
Those are
Centauri Dreams. Like, I've had Paul on my over on the Weekly Space Hangout. He was fantastic. He is always looking for those sort of next level, next generation ideas for essentially sending probes to other star systems, and that's sort of so he's cherry picking every little cool idea that comes along. Totally agree.
He is a great resource. And I should name some others. I'm just having problems thinking of too many. I think too highly of. Honestly, it was Universe Day and Centauri Dreams. I've been getting my news for like ever since I got out of grad school and had to use it only on the internet.
Well, I'll tell you who's kicking my butt. Then is space NASA space flight is probably my favorite space launch website. They're great. I really
I thought it
like
has to be
Ethan Siegel
NASA.
from Starts with a Bang. I've had him. Had a chance to interview him a few times, and he does a really good job of taking the really complex cosmology and turning it into something that's very simple that you can understand. And of course, I know
Oh,
you.
Sono's good at that too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I know you've worked with Paul Metzeler. He's great. There's a lot of really great communicators. I think one of my favorite parts of what I get a chance to do is showcase as many people as I can. So it's great to be able to redirect everyone's attention to the other people that are
It's
doing great jobs out there.
I remember when I first got in, I was worried everyone was going to be a prima donna, and I think you and Joe Scott were the first to ever actually approach me to work on something. And I was like, "Oh well, that's safe. I've known Joe, still at the same time, and well, I've been reading Fraser stuff for years. That's a safe area." And everybody I've worked with though has been surprisingly friendly, relaxed. It's a very nice community. So
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
I'm not sure why I'm always so surprised there only prima donnas hanging out. It's all
Yeah.
really nice people.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, let's see. So let's get some questions. Tesla Ranger says that your roboticism is nearly unnoticeable. Is that the technical term for your speech impediment?
Eroticism? Yes, they have of course, picked a term that you can't pronounce if you have it.
Oh, that's
Um,
mean.
yeah. I think that's why so people usually assume it's a list, but the eroticism has been improving. I've been getting speech therapy for 8 or 9 months now, I think, and still got a ways to go. It's not natural yet, but I can usually pronounce the words while I'm actually concentrating on pronouncing them. But it's not natural yet,
You did
so
you did actually just before we started. You did one and you sort of showed.
I
What
was probably was it? It will probably take another year, and when I say year, it's versus
as
year,
opposed
and
to yeah, the
yeah.
way you would normally pronounce year. So that's awesome, man. It's I mean, again, I think what a testimony to like I think for you it must have been tough when you first started doing your podcasts with the speech impediment that you have to feel like you're getting judged all the time. And you definitely, people are, awful in the comments, but I also think people just they don't mind at all. They love it. It's who you are. So I
It
think
takes a while to get used to for some people. Others, though, I mean, for me, it was a choice to change. It was initially with the show, and I never even meant for there to be a show. But I thought if this gets bigger, I will go ahead and get somebody to narrate them. And every time I floated the idea of getting a narrator, once the audience was big enough, I could get a volunteer. It got rejected by the audience. I said, if I'm going to keep doing this, the impediment's got to get toned back a little bit. I never really thought, I never even noticed it growing up. I mean, I knew I had one, but if I got any feedback from people at all, was either, oh, could you slow down a bit? Or, oh, I like that. It's a nice voice. So, of course, once you get on the internet, people are very friendly at
yeah,
times.
yeah, of course.
But to be honest, I don't think I got hit with it nearly as hard as I've seen
Yeah.
in comment sections on over at SFIA and over here at University too are usually a lot friendlier than what you see on a lot of other channels.
Well,
So,
you can't have a garden without a gardener.
yeah.
So,
And fortunately, we don't get nearly as many weeds. So,
yeah. Yeah. So Maple Flavor asked a question. What do we think about an upscale project breakthrough Starshot, effectively building a railway to other star systems? So,
I love this idea.
oh, me too, me too. So I'll set some background, and then I'd love you to sort of think about the future here. So the idea of the breakthrough Starshot is to use lasers, you zap tiny little nanoprobes, and to give them, some significant percentage of the speed of light, and they zap off and fly from world to world at potentially 20% the speed of light. What do you think about sort of that idea as a way to feasibly explore other star systems? And what do you think about sort of what does the future of that look like if we can build infrastructure?
I think, and I mean, we actually have a couple of videos on that. There's one that's interstellar laser highways. So I think it's just interstellar highways. It's the idea that you just keep scaling it up. The sun's got an output of what 4 times 10 to the 26 watts, a greater sun on that, and you need about 1.5 gigawatts per ton to accelerate it at reflecting, accelerate that at 1G, and it's a lot of power to do that. But there was a lot of power there. People say, why would you build a Dyson sphere? And I say, well, that would be one reason. And theoretically, you could push megaton starships, not little nanogram things,
Yeah.
up to, with it, as close to light speed as you really want to get. I don't think you really want to go over 80%, but you could. And in tandem, you could use that as what you launch them with, so you only have to carry your slowdown fuel, which knocks you up a good amount too. Um, but that's one of those things where I think that is definitely a pathway, especially if we don't manage to get a good fusion system going. The other thing, though, of course, is you've got reaction mass as propellant. You don't actually need that when you're using the photons for that, but you can beam energy out to a ship that's running on an ion drive, for instance, and now you don't need the huge reactor. You just need that fuel, which you're going to be expending. And I guess what would be the specific impulse or something like that? It should be about 10 times higher, I would think, than what we're using now. That's a big difference, though.
And someone mentioned this idea of the air breathing ion engine, which have you looked into this at all?
I've heard of that one. The thing about with a lot of those is trying to get enough thrust out to break out of the gravity well when you've got all that air too.
Well, so the idea is that you would use you'd use an ion engine so that it would be able to essentially have a source of fuel for station keeping in the
Mhm.
Earth's atmosphere. So you could have it orbiting the Earth. You could be sucking in particles of air. You would then be accelerating them out the back using solar power, and so you'd be able to station keep without having to use any fuel.
Oh yeah,
And it's
that's one of the ones I like. I know the Russians play around with the ion thrusters a lot more. The other one, of course, is what's it? I can't remember what's it called at the moment. Electrodynamic tethering, the one from Tethers Unlimited. I like that one a lot. Where you just have solar panels doing the actual thrust there. But at the same time, that's a lot of space junk.
yeah.
There's this 2,000-mile long cable floating through the vacuum of space to run into. So I think shooting the energy up to an ion thruster or something that could actually regather some of the from some of the air would be a nicer way. But I think at the same time that you could start, you got that much space infrastructure, you start sourcing your station keeping reaction mass off of, say, xenon from the moon. Might be a better choice there, but
But
anything
even
we start
use that idea of being able to in situ, right? You could be flying between star systems. You could be scooping up particles. You could be zapping your spacecraft with lasers. You could be using that as electricity to then use that as an accelerant to fire out your ion engines. So,
I mean, that's the Busod ramjet idea, and of course, that one doesn't quite work out. Though it's a great way to slow a ship down without fuel. Um,
right. Well, you can't necessarily suck in enough hydrogen to run a fusion engine, but you maybe could run an ion engine.
yeah, because you're getting your power from somewhere else,
Yeah, because you're getting power
and
from somewhere else.
you get a maximum speed at some point in time off that, where you're just absorbing so much momentum that speeding out what the laser can do of it. But that's still pretty high speed,
Yeah.
and again, if you've got a system where you actually do get a Busod ramjet, where it's only the slowdown phase, you push the ship up at with lasers from home, and then it slows down by bringing in that material as it goes. And now all of a sudden, you don't need to worry about the rocket equation so much, which is really the death sentence for a lot of basic rocket concepts. You just can't get that really good ideal space opera science fiction ship with the rocket equation strangling you at every step.
Yeah. Great question from Joe Ivo. Isaac, why do you think the Civilizations at the End of Time episodes were so popular?
I think it was probably because they said civilizations at the end of time.
Is it just like sounds like it's out of some Star Trek episode?
It's that I never thought those episodes would do well at all. The first one was made kind of as a summary for like 6 or 7 other videos, and I think I even start off by saying you need to watch all these other episodes first. And it was really more of a completeness thing. I thought those would be my worst performing ones, but they turned out to be the most popular. Um, and I think for a lot of us, talking about that end game, how far off it is always something that kind of keeps the mind going. Obviously, we know we've got so much time left. A billion years is an eternity to a civilization that's been around for 4,000. And so when you start talking about a billion, 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 it just starts getting to the point where it's kind of arbitrary. But you start thinking about those time scales, and they're huge. And say, how do you stave off the end of eternity, basically?
Yeah.
And it's a fascinating idea, but I was always very surprised by how well they performed. I assume it's just the title. clickbait
I
on
mean, the
accident.
heat death, things like that. I mean, it's funny to think we have these existential thoughts about what the future holds for us. About, we feel sad and scared about the end of the earth in, say, a billion years, when the solar heating gets to the point that all the oceans evaporate, and then whatever 6 billion years after that, when the sun expands as a red giant, and we
Heat up.
think
Go on.
about the time when all the black holes have lost all their Hawking radiation, and yet we don't. So it's weird to feel that kind of fear. Like, people are always so concerned when they hear that Andromeda is going to be crashing into the Milky Way.
Yeah,
And
that's not too much for concern, but it does seem to bother a lot of
yeah,
people.
yeah, and I'm really fascinated about what that is. What's that coming from? Why are people so unnerved by these long term inevitabilities, essentially?
It could partially
While
be the community's fault for the Andromeda one, because I think people do hype up, the fear factor on we've been eating galaxies
yeah,
for
yeah,
12 billion
yeah.
years. Um, and of course, with Andromeda, there will be a lot of damage when you have a galactic merger like that. But it's planetary ejection and that kind of stuff, and it's stuff you can plan around and prepare for. If you're still around in 3 billion years, I'd assume you either got much better technology or you really upscale the amount you have. And you don't really need to use science to move stars around, so long as you don't mind engaging in a lot of brute force.
So, when you have your episodes, and you're sort of looking far into the future, and even thinking about things like, when we go and we build a Dyson sphere, or when we build, some kind of megastructure and stuff, I think in people's minds there's this, like, physical bodies. We're doing this still with our existing meat bodies. But I think that's the part that is the hardest to sort of really predict, is what does the future hold when the technology is rising so quickly. For us to be kind of, beat boot pressing computer buttons and pushing levers and flying, dogfighting our spaceships, it doesn't feel like any of that is realistic.
That is one of the, and I mean, in the episodes, we do mention a lot of times that realistically, you probably wouldn't be too much biological at that point. But we do try to focus on, if you've got one new tech, focus on that new tech from a kind of a modern perspective, just to make it easier to fit into your worldview. But at the same time, I don't think that I'd be surprised. I mean, maybe a million or a billion years from now, there wouldn't be anything that was human left over. But, the singularity is near, as Kurzweil says. But I don't think you're not going to have people after that. You might have lots of people who are cyborged up, well, still people. But I think you'd have a lot of people like the Amish who just decide to stick around. And you do not need some of these things to do space flight. It might be easier, but you don't have to. So you could have people go out and colonize the stars who were completely modern normal. And I don't think there's any reason to think that those people would cease to exist just because they hadn't embraced some of that higher technology. I don't think that you're going to have a single kind of state for humanity as we have now with Homo sapiens, kind of a very diverse spectrum that wouldn't even count as speciation, just because, how do you qualify someone as part of the species when they are not even biological in the least bit? They're just an uploaded mind. But then you have to ask which is more important, that psychology or that physiology. And it's going to be a wide spectrum. As I say, if there are no aliens, just wait a million years and there will be. You know,
Yeah,
come
yeah,
across some quality planet where it's evolved 4 legs, or has the weird forehead of the week from Star Trek.
yeah. That's exactly what it's going to be. It's going to be like thrilling headgear. All right, let's have it out. Let's have the Fermi Paradox argument. What and of course, for anyone who doesn't know what the Fermi Paradox is, this is the idea that the universe is big and old, and there's been plenty of time for aliens to show up, that there's nothing permitting the travel between star systems. So it should be possible within, say, 10 million years for a civilization on any part of the galaxy to have colonized the entire galaxy and left some kind of record that it was there. Where are all the aliens?
That's with the Fermi paradox. The problem is there are no good solutions. That's why it's kind of paradoxical. People say, well, it's not really a paradox. Nobody expects it to be a genuine paradox, of course. I tend to develop the idea that it almost has to be the rare earth or
Yeah,
rare intelligence ones, just because they're not that good of theories. They're just the only ones that don't have big holes in them.
yeah,
We don't really know how common life is yet. to emerge, let alone to develop down the pathway to intelligence, which people tend to think of as inevitable, but probably is not. And that just seems, we don't know the probabilities, but at least when we don't know them, we can say there could be one in a trillion, you know? Whereas with a lot of these other things, it's not that the basic reasoning is bad. It's when you start picking them apart, it doesn't make a lot of sense. I can't really see alien civilizations emerging that just sat on their homeworld for millions of years, keeping
Mm-hmm.
quiet.
Well, even
Some
if
might,
one wants to, the others
yes, one.
wouldn't.
And if one does, it's the exclusivity thing. 99% of people can want to do one thing. If that 1% does something that triggers the Fermi paradox, they decide to broadcast, it's over, just like that. But at the same time, things like expanding don't seem like almost everyone wouldn't do it. It seems the other way around. Everyone wants to do this. And so there has to be a really good reason why they're not
Yeah.
doing it. And yet the science says, well, it's something very hard now. It doesn't appear to be in any way physically impossible.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're
There
all
are 30,000 asteroids in the solar system right now that came from other star systems.
so that high they've kind of hurt.
Theoretically. They haven't been
Oh,
discovered, but theoretically, right? So if asteroids can do it, if stupid asteroids can make the journey, then robots can make the journey.
yeah, and people should be able to too. And of course, what do we mean by people? What do we mean by robot? Yeah, that von Neumann chicken thing where you just send everybody's brain digitally uploaded onto one tiny little spaceship, and you send it out there. It arrives, eats everything up, and turns it into people,
Yeah.
or civilizations. And in that respect, to say, well, maybe everybody decides they want to live in a virtual utopia. They say, okay, I could see that. Space is much more boring than whatever virtual utopia you've made. But to get to that point, to be able to do that, you have to have the same technology just to run a little interface where the people are talking to you in that virtual reality that could easily run a robot that could do all those tasks in space colonization. So, yes, you might decide to stay home, but it only takes one person to quickly put together one little space probe
Yeah.
that can run off and colonize the whole galaxy on its own.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
so,
and not only that, I mean, not just colonize one galaxy, colonize the entire Hubble volume of
yeah.
space, right?
And that's the other thing. There's plenty of space between the stars, and there's no barrier, between galaxies. There are stars out there in between that people can hop onto as midpoints. If a couple million year journey is something you can't sustain, you just colonize the other stars along the way. And so long as your ships can go faster than whatever the expansion is there locally, you're good. That's at least 4 or 5 billion light years.
So where do you fall then? Do you fall on the rare Earth
Um,
hypothesis, or do you fall on the Great Filter hypothesis?
I try not to have a specific set position on it, just because even with just the rare ones, I try to include the other ones too. But I tend to be of the opinion that life is probably less common than we think. There are a lot more filters along the way, and then intelligence doesn't really go down this pathway to technology too often. There's nothing to really back that assertion
Yep.
up other than it's easier for me to see it being all three as 1 in 1,000 probabilities than any one of those being specifically 1 in 1 trillion or something.
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
I always just feel like even if it popped up anywhere in our Hubble sphere,
mhm.
it could colonize the entire thing. Like
Yeah.
that is the level of rarity that we're looking at. That life is so rare in the universe that that aliens will never see other versions of themselves. But then you think about these ideas of like the universe being infinite,
Oh, yeah.
and
We
then
don't
you
know how big
get
it is. We just know how big the observable portion is. So
right, right. But if the universe itself is actually infinite, then
yeah,
there's actually going to be an infinite number of versions of us having this conversation,
it's,
wondering where all the aliens are, right?
uh, we look at I mean, we can say whenever I try to look at a whole number on this, about the best I can do is there's no intelligent civilizations within 1 billion light years of us. Just because after that, there's enough time lag that it starts getting realistic that you could have had ones pop up we wouldn't have seen yet. But um, that's still only a tiny little corner of the observable universe, let alone I
The
think it was
actual
like 10
universe.
to 77 light years, something like that you have to go before you'd automatically start getting repeats. But if it is that big, then everything happens. Big enough number, even the infinitely improbable happens,
Yeah.
and you get repeats and repeats. Same with the mini worlds theory, and just we actually explored that one time. You get weird ones where things that seem to be impossible are happening over and over again because even though it's just coincidence that a gourd or a sandwich appeared on your desk when you hit your light switch, it happened in your universe so many times over and over again. Even when people checked it out, that you assume there's a physical principle there, they're just not spotting. Just because in one universe that happened,
Yeah.
and to them that magical thing is for real.
So let's get some more questions, comments. Give us some topics. Problem is that everybody is. Okay, so
Ancestor simulation,
Neil
assuming.
Upfellow says, Isaac, ancestor simulation. Any opinion? So what do you think? Are we living in a
One in three
simulation?
chance, but well, that's one of those ones where my usual thing is don't worry about whether or not we are actually in one of these things because it doesn't really make a difference,
Mm-hmm.
whether you're a simulation or not. But the way we work it out right now, it's a 1 in 3 probability, just because we only have three plausible states. Either it's impossible because civilizations destroy themselves or it can't be done, which I really buy into, or it's possible, but it's possible, but people just don't do it, which I actually consider the most likely premise. That's just very uncommon. Or the third one is that it is possible, and there are millions of the fake ones for every one real one. And so you almost certainly, if that's the case, one of those. So I would say 1 in 3 because we use the principle of indifference to come up with that number, but I'd say it's probably more like 50-50.
50-50
Yet
that we're
I,
living in a simulation.
yeah. And yet I would say that's just assuming each option is equally likely. I don't think it is, though, because there's almost no reason why you would ever actually have an episode coming up discussing this. So I probably shouldn't go into too much, but there's almost no occasion where you would ever actually want to simulate someone to full emulation. I don't need for my house computer to really be sentient. I just need to be able to carry on a conversation, and that's a lot of processing power and a lot of
Yeah.
wasted heat.
Damien Reloader wants to know why I pronounce all the vowels as the letter O. It's because I'm Canadian. Obviously, that's how we do this.
I see somebody else get hit with that footage.
um, Aaron Blair wants to know, Isaac, why are we not sending more probes to Europa?
Because you have to drill down the ice to find all the cool stuff. We can't just send a simple probe to orbit. We have to land on that thing. And how thick is it the 10 kilometers?
100 kilometers.
That's a lot of drilling.
That's a lot of
That's
drilling, yeah.
that's one of those things where that would be probably our first big manned mission, I would think, just because you want to set up a camp there and you'll be drilling for samples for years. I don't think that's a good one for robots, at least not a modern robot.
So I did an episode just maybe a month and a half ago on this, and they've actually got drills in. They're running in Greenland, which actually have a heated point. They spool out wire from inside of them, and they can move through the ice in Earth's gravity in about like 10 centimeters an hour, I think. So it's pretty fast. And they calculated that they'd be able to make it through there. Someone else is saying 40 kilometers, somewhere between 10 and 100 kilometers is the thickness of the ice. That they, depending on the size of the probe, they could get down into the ice between 1 to 2 years of drilling if they
That
had.
one, I think would be very worth it. But then once you're down there, you start to take another probe that can actually go around inside there hunting
Yeah.
for stuff.
Yeah,
And
no.
I wonder what the life would do, because you assume they'd probably have to have some kind of light on it, because I don't think passive sensors would work too well there. Would the creatures run away from it or try to eat it?
I don't know.
Was
It
it
all depends
a
on what
movie?
the European space whales.
I'm trying to remember what's called. It's some movie in the last decade or so where it's kind of a sci-fi horror one.
The
They get
Europa
attacked
report.
by. Oh, that's the one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But I wouldn't say that was very hard science, but it was fun to watch. So
Have you been watching The Expanse this year?
I have. It was
Did you
actually all
see
book of the
this
month.
week's
Yeah.
episode?
I just did. Yeah.
With
And
That was amazing. I've never seen. I actually sort of sent a tweet to the writers of The Expanse. I sent a tweet to James S. A. Corey, the two people,
those, yeah.
yeah, saying how great, how thrilling a space battle, proper inertia with an open toolbox is inside your spaceship, and
I
how
don't think
that
it was ever shown that before.
I've never seen that before. I've never seen anything like that, and it was as scary and thrilling as any action movie, and yet I knew that it was because of the science making it so legit. So don't worry, we're not going to spoil it, but it is I would say that was the finest episode, in my opinion, of The Expanse so far. Was the one that happened last week.
It was a really nice one,
So good.
and I don't think I don't think anyone's done that. And we were talking about the other day is you don't have spacesuits on these ships. It's not for you're not trying to get used to low gravity when you live in space. You're trying to get used to varying gravity. You don't
Yeah.
experience that. Oh, I can only live in a quarter of a G. No, no, these people aren't adapted for zero gravity. They're adapted for now the gravity is zero. Now it's four in the other direction. Now it's five in the other direction, and because you have to be able to cope in that environment in anything that's not padded down.
Yeah.
You might even have spacesuits that have airbags, but in those kind of accelerations, a knife is bad. But I mean, can you imagine some of those tools coming? Well, that was the first time I've ever seen that, and so
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
amazing point to have.
Yeah, and then and also the racing ship and sort of the way the seats could turn around depending on the
Yeah.
forces that they were experiencing and the methods they dealt with to deal with the high G's. I mean, the people ask me how realistic it is, and the bottom line is not realistic at all because of that fusion drive, right? Like
Yes,
that's the magic.
that's the one, and they don't. I mean, none of the ships are going too fast for something like fusion to technically allow. It's just how long can you accelerate at 1G? And again, after a week, you're going half, what, 2% of light speed. And
Yeah, yeah,
you're usually at your destination pretty soon. I think we would do 1 week to Saturn. I actually did a table one of these ways to make it easier for people to do that, but I can't remember what episode that was. You just can't, you don't thrust like that. And it's a really wasteful way to use fuel anyway, because you burn in fuel right up to the moment you start burning the other direction. Burn it faster and coast all the way.
yeah. So people looking forward to Frank Herbert's Dune, made by Denis Villeneuve. I don't know if you've heard that's
I've
happening.
not heard anything about that coming.
Yeah.
Is there these things? I heard somebody saying Ian M. Banks' cultural series was getting a TV
Yes.
show. Yeah,
And the
that I just
Foundation books are getting picked up by Amazon.
that is awesome.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
would love to see another remake of Dune. I'm a big fan of the original movie by Lynch, and I would love to have seen the one by Jodorowsky.
Yes.
But I actually thought for the miniseries they did around 2000, the first one was kind of weak just because they didn't have the budget for it. But the Children of Dune one was actually very well done,
Yeah.
um, and I would love to have seen some more for those. Because it is such a good basic concept there. You can't go wrong there. But I'd love to see the Foundation actually as a TV show.
Yeah.
It could never be done as a proper movie, but it would be
No.
great.
Well, I think the thing that's been great, and the Expanse is sort of showing this. If you take an existing property that's like like a proper sci-fi book where someone has thought through the has thought through the plot points, has figured out the characters, knows that the whole thing is going to come together, so it's not episodic. It is this. They're telling this story over multiple seasons, then turning a book into 6 episodes, 8 episodes, 10 episodes of a TV show is so much more satisfying. And we saw that with Game of Thrones. It's so much more satisfying than trying to turn it into a short little movie. I mean, the poor people who love the Gunslinger and then they got their Gunslinger movie.
Yeah, what
That
was
should
that?
be a season of a TV show. So I'm really looking forward to, with the success of The Expanse and Game of Thrones and all this kind of stuff. I'm really looking forward to people picking up these great books and turning them into modern multiple episode TV shows with a beginning, a
I think
middle, and an end.
one big advantage we have now is in the old days you had 3 or 4 outlets or maybe a dozen even during the cable age, and no matter how you cut it, a science fiction show always costs more money to produce because you got to pay the actors the same, and then you have the special effects. And when you're competing for raw ratings, you're going for a niche market that costs more. And it's never that sci-fi wasn't popular; it was just more expensive for less produce. Now, though, we can do these mid-range things cost-wise, and people watch TV, any show, whenever they want to, and that opens that up because you're not competing against whoever else is in that slot. And I think that we're not just seeing that in sci-fi and fantasy, but a lot of other genres. It's really expanding. I wish it would expand more on the science and history side of things. You think of that some of the TV channels that actually specialize in that, they don't seem to produce very good stuff.
Yeah.
I'm not going to make fun of Sharknado.
I have never seen Sharknado, so
I haven't because I'm worried it won't be as good as I hear it is.
yeah, yeah. Um, what? So Trustin Pate is asking, what do you think of? I guess Star Trek Discovery. Have you been watching that?
I've watched the first 3 or 4 episodes. I have this rule about shows, though, is I always like to watch the pilot to make sure if it's something I want to see. But then I wait till the whole season's complete and then
Wow.
binge watch it some weekend. Usually after I hear whether it's renewed or not, too, because that way I know I'm not getting my expectations up for that cliffhanger. But I did that with Dark Matter, for instance, and it's just nice to binge watch stuff. Sundays are my sci-fi binge watching day. Usually Doctor Who the last couple weeks. Old classic Doctor Who, though, the Peter Davison, Tom Baker days, which, you don't really want to actually watch those. You kind of want to listen to them and look at the screen they was watching because the visual quality is not that great. It's like I walk around in tinfoil for some horror movie like Forbidden Planet from the 50s. That movie still is great to watch, even now.
Dave, Earth Stood Still
Yeah,
is one of my.
the original, not
Yeah,
the
yeah. I was mentioning last week. I was telling everybody that 2001 just freaked me out.
That is a really good one, and I think it was so good it actually made the first Star Trek film bad because I think they tried to make those big cinematic, like
Yeah,
2001, the first 40 minutes where there's nobody talking,
yeah.
and so much of that first Star Trek film is nobody talking, everyone staring and stuff. And But yeah, that is still a great film, great book too. And So is 2010. Actually, I like the film and the book for that. I would love to have seen some more out of that, though. Obviously, we're not going to get more by the original writer, I think, at this point, beyond 3001. But I mean, I would not mind seeing something like that redone, but I'm not sure that's necessary.
Hmm.
I did like the new Blade Runner film, for instance, but the original stories are fine. There's no need to reboot a lot of these. And I think that maybe Hollywood needs to stop rebooting stuff quite so
Yeah,
often.
well, that's the thing. Every reboot is stealing precious life force
Yeah.
from a new property, right? If you want your reboot, then you don't get to have the Expanse. How
Yeah.
many Star Trek movies or how many Expanse seasons could you buy with a single Star Trek movie?
You think about it, well, I don't want to knock Lost in Space
Or
because
a
it's so
Star Wars movie?
yeah, I'm not too happy. But I was very invested in the expanded universe for Star Wars, so I don't like seeing the entire history get rewritten. I did like the Abrams film. I haven't decided on the newest one yet whether or not I like it or not. Uh, Plot inconsistencies bug me. you know?
Yeah.
I always try to shut my brain off about the physics part of it, though. Otherwise, it is like
Yeah,
three or
you
four.
can't shut your brain. Yeah, you. I'm willing to forgive any amount of bad science, pretty much, as long as they
Sometimes
don't.
it's actually easier for the ones that are really bad sides because you're not even thinking about that. It's like,
Yeah, yeah. But the plot inconsistencies, that's the problem,
yeah.
right? That, you know, yeah.
And you gotta stay whatever your magic science is for your given fictional setting. You gotta stick to it. Otherwise, you start creating those inconsistencies. I think it's Brandon Sanders's laws of magic that applies to science fiction too. And But I mean, there's so many of these intellectual properties. I did like the Battlestar Galactica reboot, but the one thing that was missing out of the original show was, oh, if humanity's been wiped out, these people are not very depressed, right? And in the reboot, they definitely are. And in fact, a little bit too much after a couple seasons, it was getting kind of irritating. But so many of the other properties that have tried to do this since then are like, we got to be grimmer and darker than Battlestar Galactica was. And it doesn't fit for some of them. And, Lost in Space, for instance, was very happy, silly, at times campy even, but, very happy family. The new one seems to be dysfunctional. So I'm not sure if I like it or not.
I've only watched. Have you seen the new Lost in Space?
Yeah, only the first few episodes
Yeah,
because
me
I'm gonna
too.
binge it when it's done.
Yeah.
But I'm starting to like. I think the character I like most so far is the younger to Penny. Penny, she seems to be having fun with the thing, and that's to me, Lost in Space is a very fun show. So it's kind of what I was looking for with them there. But you reboot a franchise has to be different. But I feel like don't lose track of the original feeling.
Um,
And
Maple Flavor says Stargate #1. I 100% agree with you, man. If I could have one show get properly made, and I've watched these new Stargates, and they're not
Mhm.
great, but I love Stargate SG1. I loved Stargate Universe, Stargate
Atlantis.
Atlantis. They were all terrific, and that
I
is
think it's probably my favorites. Well, a
yeah,
close one with Babylon 5 and DS9 for the 90s, but of course it was later in
yeah.
after those. I did like Universe. I just felt that it was kind of weakly done. And actually, as I was just talking about there, they kind of made it a little bit darker and grimmer than I think it
I
needed to
think
be.
you're wrong. I think you should go back and watch it again. I actually thought it was terrific. It was
Well,
really
shoot,
good. Yeah, there
I
was
probably should.
there was a lot going on there, and they didn't get enough time to really kind of dig into it.
No,
But I thought Universe was actually,
it got canceled way too
it
soon.
totally
You
did.
think
Yeah,
about it, the first season. I mean, I see that with newer franchises, but this is one that had an established 15 seasons between Atlantis and Stargate
yeah,
SG
yeah,
One. And whereas like Star Trek, I mean, you think of most Star Trek franchises other than the original, the fourth season's awful, the franchise had staying power because people knew it was going to get better. And the best season of TNG is like 3 and 4. Universe never got that chance,
yeah.
and it was getting a lot better in season 2. I actually liked the fourth season, but I did it had its weaknesses. I would love to see more out of that franchise. I know they're working on stuff, but I hope they're not going to reboot it out of existence.
So let's do a little bit of a spoiler alert here, and we've got about 5 more minutes. So, what are some topics that you're working on? What are some topics that you are sort of see happening in the next few months?
Well, I think the loose theme for the upcoming summer is going to be post scarcity civilizations, and kind of both seeing episodes
Hmm.
that are not too much on them, but rather what they can do, as well as some kind of focused on what actually are the problems these guys have to encounter, the unique problems of that civilization. Um, and that's kind of got to be the overarching theme for the summer. This upcoming one is, I renamed it Alien Beacons to Interstellar Beacons. It was originally going to be Interstellar Beacons and mega telescopes, but I decided it had to be broken into two. There was just too much material. So we're taking a look at giant telescopes in 2 weeks. This week is Interstellar Alien Beacons, and just kind of seeing how far away can you see these things if they really want to invest in being heard. How far away can you pick it up with the kind of modern stuff we have now? And it's big. And then I think we're going back to space warfare for planetary invasions. And I think we decided we're going to do another one on interstellar arc ships. And I know we're doing mind uploading for the new Dennis E. Taylor
That's a
book.
tough one. Like, I've got episodes that I did early on, topics I knocked out early on,
And you want
which
to redo them
I
now?
want to
Yeah.
redo because I'm so much better at sort of writing, and Chad is such a better editor these days. And I feel like I've shut down that topic, but I feel like I want to just sort of like quietly replace an
I
old
worried
concept
about
with a
doing
new
that, but
version.
I found that whenever I redid one, either under a slight new title or a little bit more expansion, nobody minded from the
Yeah.
original audience. So I'm kind of waiting until my speech impediment is completely gone to do a complete reboot of any of the old episodes. Right now, I just pick one and say I can do more on this, so we can break it into 3 episodes, look at it again. But oh yeah, that's how it is. You get into these things and you look at your work from 2 3 years ago and you just want to redo it,
Yeah, exactly.
do it better now.
So much happier with the work that we're putting out now. And I look back at the ones that we did that were 4 years old, right? And they were short and they didn't have a lot of graphics, and now it's just a much tighter operation. So I think good. I'm glad. Thank you for giving me permission to go back around and take another crack at them.
Something I've been worried about for the last year is whether or not I should redo any old episodes. And I mean, there was so many. I think somebody said you got to run out of topics. I was like, I got a queue that's like 10 years
Yeah,
long.
me
That's not going
too.
to happen.
Yeah. So what have I got coming up? I've got, and these are just. I want to talk about adaptive optics and interferometers,
Try
space
time
suits,
old.
space internet. Sort of starting off, it's like Starlink, and then sort of seeing what that would move to the next like communication. Look back at Snowball Earth, space navigation systems using pulsars, things like that. Yeah, I got a lot of same thing. I got a million topics, and
Trying to find time for them all.
and you don't have time for them all. Yeah, and to do a good job
And the
of
right
them.
visuals. That was actually we did the Mega Telescopes episode. We ended up inserting some interferometry to talk about LIGO a bit, but I almost completely deleted it out of the episode because interferometry is such a hard one to show if you can't put the right visuals up for it. And whereas telescopes, I mean, optical telescopes are much more intuitively simple.
Yeah.
And I hope you did a better job with that than I was
I
planning
haven't
to.
done it yet, so now I'm afraid. Now you frightened me. Uh, I mean, I'll probably just go to the East, the European Southern Observatory, and just bring as many pictures of their various interferometers as I can. But it's the future of interferometry, which would be awesome. So,
It's such a big topic, though, that I mean, with telescope, I was thinking we talked about the over by you, the Zenith, Large Zenith telescope. It's over there. We were talking about that one. It's a fun idea. You could spend an hour just on something like that. So
yeah, yeah.
never run out of topics. We're talking about science.
Well, Where does the time go, Isaac? It's been an hour, and I know you've got some writing to do. You've got maybe some TV shows to watch. So let's wrap this up. I want to thank everybody for joining us in the chat. It was great. Thanks to the moderators who jumped in and stayed on top of things. Isaac, I'm so glad you accepted the call to adventure to come and
Very
hang out with
glad.
us all this hour.
It was a great time being on, Fraser. Thanks for having me.
All right, I will shut this down. Thanks everybody. So I'm going to put something up next. Maybe find another guest next week. So I will put up another event, and then I'll see if I can find someone to come and hang out with me. And then Isaac, when you're ready, let's get your live streams going over on your channel. I'm ready to help out. So we'll go from there.
Thanks.
All right, thanks everybody.